home felt like a military camp when I was a child. Being a college professor, my father had quite severe rules. Julie, my older sister, was the epitome of the ideal child, obedient, industrious, and constantly seeking to please everyone. On the other hand, I was constantly pushing the envelope. During supper, my father would yell, "Laura, sit up straight. A woman never slouches." I used to roll my eyes, sit up, and then slump back down as soon as he turned to face me. It was an ongoing struggle for dominance. My mother was equally strict, even though she didn't say much. She would look at my choices of friends or my outfits with disapproval. "What are the neighbors going to think?" was her constant question. Even though I felt cramped at home, I managed to make little adjustments to make my place. When I was 17, I began dating Paul, who was 20 and a college student. Everything my parents wouldn't want for me. We met whenever we could, keeping it a secret. I thought for a time that everything was finally working out for me. My goal was to attend college and be free from my controlling parents, but circumstances had other ideas. I became ill in the mornings a few months after turning 19. I initially dismissed it as exam stress, but eventually I was unable to ignore it. I can still picture me standing in a tiny restroom at a petrol station, nervously grasping a plastic pregnancy test. There was one pink line. Good, I had a baby. The days that followed seemed to fly by. My thoughts on what to do would not go away. Though I knew I had to inform Paul, I could never muster the courage to call him. At last, I was unable to resist it any longer. We gathered at our typical location, a little park out of sight for everyone. Paul saw me and grinned, but his smile vanished as soon as he saw my look. Clasping my hand, he said, "Laura, what's wrong?" I withdrew and gave myself a hug. I blurted out, "I'm pregnant." There was a deep quiet after that. Paul's expression wavered between amazement, bewilderment, and finally dread. "Are you certain?" he inquired. Tears were forming in my eyes as I nodded. Every test I took came back positive. With abrupt coldness in his eyes, Paul raked his hands through his hair. "Laura, you must have an abortion to get rid of it. It is your only choice. This is too young for us. It's going to wreck our life." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. Paul, the boy I believed I loved, was encouraging me to get rid of our child as if it were nothing at all. I turned away and snarled, "Get out of my sight." He didn't say anything more before departing, leaving me to make the difficult choice on my own. It was considerably tougher to tell my parents. I waited until after supper, when my dad was reading the newspaper in the living room, where he usually sat. Julie was there, too, in the background, watching my mom knit. With trembling in my voice, I said, "I have something to tell you." My father gave me a dubious look as he dropped the newspaper. "Laura, what is it?" he inquired. I inhaled deeply. "I have a pregnancy." The response was worse than I had anticipated. My father began to rant about his disappointment and shame, and his cheeks flushed. My mother started crying uncontrollably, worried about what the neighbors might say. Julie was horrified and disgusted as she stood there. My father said, "You'll get an abortion," once he had settled down enough to talk coherently. "We'll locate a covered clinic. Nobody needs to be aware of this error." I didn't want to listen at first, but my family's pressure got to me. A few days later, I was seated in a physician's office. Julie and my mother sat like sentries next to me. The physician, a gracious woman in her 50s, scowled as she reviewed my charts. Then, with anxiety in her eyes, she raised her head to face me. She replied softly, "Laura, I need to tell you something important. If you have an abortion, there's a good chance you may never be able to have children again due to your medical history." Her remarks really got to me. Be unable to become parents again. All at once, the decision seemed obvious. I responded, no, in a louder voice than I had anticipated. I refused to do it. I'm retaining the child. Julie rolled her eyes and my mother gasped, but I refused to back down. It was a quiet and nervous drive home. My father was waiting for us when we came through the door, awaiting news. So he insisted. Frustrated, my mother spit out, she wouldn't do it. With a twisted expression of wrath, my father uttered, "After everything we've done for her." Taking a deep breath, he stated in a last frigid tone, "Leave. Once you've packed, depart this house. I won't have you embarrassing this family with your condition because you're not one of my daughters." My mother nodded in agreement, her eyes hard. "You heard your father. Go." Julie just stood there, silent and judgmental. Tears ran down my face as I rushed to my room, grabbing some clothes and throwing them into a bag. As I headed for the door, my father's voice stopped me one last time. "And don't think about coming back. As far as we're concerned, you're dead to us." The door slammed behind me with a sound that felt final and devastating. I was alone, pregnant, and homeless. In desperation, I called the only person I thought might help, my Aunt Kelly. She and Uncle Scott had always been the outcasts of the family, living in another state and rarely talking to my parents. "Laura, what's wrong, sweetie?" Aunt Kelly's voice was warm and concerned. Through tears, I explained everything. There was a long pause after I finished. "Where are you now?" she finally asked. "I'm outside our house. They kicked me out." Another pause. "Stay right there. We're coming to get you." The drive to Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott's house was long, but it gave me time to think about everything that had happened. Their house was small but cozy. As soon as we arrived, Aunt Kelly fussed over me, making sure I ate something while Uncle Scott carried my bag to the spare room, which would now be mine. "It's not much," he said, placing the bag down, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." I looked around the small, warm room and felt a lump in my throat. "It's perfect," I whispered. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, talking about my future, and getting used to my new life. One evening at dinner, Aunt Kelly spoke up. "We've been thinking," she said. "We want to help you continue your education." I looked up from my plate, surprised. "What do you mean?" Uncle Scott leaned forward. "We saved some money over the years. We never had kids of our own, so we want to use it to help you go to college." I was speechless. After everything that had happened, the idea of going to college felt impossible. I don't know what to say. "Say yes," Aunt Kelly smiled. "We believe in you, Laura. This baby doesn't mean the end of your dreams." With their support, I enrolled in a local community college, majoring in business management. It wasn't easy juggling classes, doctor's appointments, and the challenges of pregnancy, but I was determined to make it work. I also found a job as a waitress at a local restaurant. The owner, Evelyn, was a kind woman who understood my situation and was flexible with my hours. It wasn't much, but it helped me save for the baby and contribute to Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott's household. The day my son was born was the most terrifying and beautiful day of my life. After hours of labor, I held him in my arms, amazed by his tiny fingers and toes. Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott stood nearby, smiling proudly like grandparents. "What are you going to name him?" Aunt Kelly asked softly. I looked down at my son, peacefully asleep in my arms. "Jack," I said. "It means God is my judge, because no matter what anyone else thinks, I know I made the right choice." As I adjusted to being a mother, juggling a newborn with college classes and work, I often thought about my parents and Julie. Did they know about Jack? Did they regret what they had done? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had a new family now, one that accepted and loved me unconditionally. One day during a rare break, I was scrolling through social media when a post caught my attention. It was from Julie. My heart skipped a beat as I read it. Excited to announce that Paul and I are engaged. Can't wait to start our life together. The photo showed Julie smiling, her arm around Paul, the same Paul who had abandoned me and our child. They looked so happy, like nothing had ever happened. A wave of emotions hit me: anger, hurt, and betrayal. But then I looked over at Jack, peacefully playing in his crib, and I realized something important. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. Everything I needed was right here. The years went by quickly in a blur of diapers, textbooks, and late-night study sessions. My last semester was especially tough. I was taking extra classes to graduate on time, still working at the restaurant, and taking care of an energetic 5-year-old. Graduation day was filled with emotions. As I stood in line to receive my diploma, I looked into the crowd and saw Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott beaming with pride. Jack sat on Uncle Scott's shoulders, waving excitedly whenever he caught my eye. The real surprise came later at the graduation party Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott threw for me. While we were celebrating, Evelyn, my boss from the restaurant, pulled me aside. "Laura, I have an offer for you," she said with a smile. "I'm looking for a new restaurant manager, and I think you'd be perfect for the job." I was shocked. Me? But I've only been a waitress. Evelyn waved her hand, dismissing the thought. "You've been so much more than that. I've seen how you handle tough customers, how you organize the staff, and how you've balanced work, school, and motherhood. That's the kind of dedication and skill I need in a manager." It felt like a dream come true, a steady job with better pay and regular hours. It was exactly what Jack and I needed to start our new life. The next few years were full of positive changes. I threw myself into my new role at the restaurant, learning everything I could about management and business. Jack started school and grew into a smart, curious boy who loved to read and play baseball. It was at one of Jack's Little League games that I met Frank. He was there with his son, Tyler, who was playing on the other team. We started talking, and I was instantly drawn to his kind eyes and easy laugh. "Single, Dad?" I asked, noticing he was alone. He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "Widow, actually. Tyler's mom passed away when he was a baby. My heart ached for him. I'm so sorry. That must be hard." "It is," he admitted, "but we manage." "How about you? Single, Mom?" I laughed. Is it that obvious? Our relationship developed slowly. We were both careful, having been hurt before, and with our children in the picture, we didn't rush things. But as months passed, I found myself falling for Frank. He was kind and patient, and Jack adored him. A year after we met, Frank proposed. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a quiet moment in his backyard with our boys playing nearby. Our wedding was small and intimate, with only close friends and family. As I walked down the aisle with Jack proudly by my side as the ring bearer, I caught Kelly's eye. She was crying, but her smile was radiant. Life with Frank, Jack, and Tyler soon settled into a comfortable rhythm. A couple of years after our wedding, we were blessed with another addition to our family. Our daughter Betty was born on a warm spring morning. As I held her in my arms with Frank, Jack, and Ty gathered around the hospital bed, I felt a sense of completeness I had never known before. I loved all three of my children equally: Jack and Betty, my biological children, and Tyler, my stepson. Blood didn't matter. They were all my kids. One evening, Aunt Kelly was over helping with the kids when we were startled by a familiar voice coming from the TV. Larger than life were my parents. My father stood at a podium, waving to a cheering crowd. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, Adam Johnson announces his candidacy for mayor. My heart nearly stopped. It had been years since I had seen my parents, even if only on a screen. My father looked older, his hair grayer, but his eyes still had that same stern, determined look I remembered so well. As we watched him speak about family values and moral integrity, Kelly's face twisted with anger. Hypocrites, she spat, her voice shaking with fury. I turned to her, shocked. Aunt Kelly? She took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the screen. There's something you need to know, Laura. Something they've kept hidden for years. What? I asked, confused. What she told me next shook me to my core. Many years ago, before Julie and I were born, my parents had their first child, a boy. But he was born with severe physical disabilities, without legs. Instead of loving and caring for him, they left him at the hospital, too afraid that he would embarrass them. I felt a whirlwind of emotion, shock, disbelief, and a deep sadness for the brother I never knew. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked Aunt Kelly, my voice shaky. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Laura. I should have. But after what your parents did to you, I didn't want to add to your pain. That night, after the kids were in bed, I made a decision. I needed to find my brother. With Frank's support, we hired a private investigator. Weeks went by, and finally, we had a lead. My brother was alive, and against all odds, he had thrived. He was a successful writer, married with kids of his own. He had been adopted by a wealthy family that had given him every chance to succeed. Meeting him for the first time was surreal. Even though he looked different, I could see parts of myself in his face. His name was Larry, and he greeted me with a warm smile and open arms. I always knew I had a biological family out there somewhere, he said softly. I just never thought I'd find a sister. Over the next few months, Larry and I became close. I introduced him to my family, and he welcomed us into his. His wife, Julia, coincidentally the same name as my sister, made me laugh, and their 2 children became part of our extended family. 22 years had passed since the day my parents kicked me out. Life had moved on, bringing both joy and sorrow. My oldest, Jack, was now 20 and had just started college on a baseball scholarship. I couldn't have been prouder of the man he was becoming. One lazy Tuesday afternoon, I was scrolling through news articles when a familiar face caught my eye. It was my father, looking older but still carrying that same air of self-importance. The headline read, Mayor Adam Johnson discusses family values in exclusive interview. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the video. For a few minutes, I listened as my father talked about the importance of family and moral values. Then the interviewer asked about his children. My father's face softened into what I knew as his public sympathy look. I have one daughter, Julie. She's the light of our lives. Tragically, we lost 2 of our children. The pain never goes away, but it's made our family stronger. For days, I seethed with quiet rage. How dare they? How dare they erase me and Larry, pretending to be tragic, sympathetic figures? Almost as if fate was stepping in, Larry called, Laura, guess what? I'm doing a book signing in our hometown next week. It would mean the world to me if you could come. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I told him, a plan already forming in my mind. The following week, I found myself back in the city where I grew up. As I walked through the familiar streets, memories came rushing back, some good, but many painful. I pushed them aside, staying focused on what I needed to do. The book signing was being held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. As I entered, I realized Larry hadn't been exaggerating. Half the town seemed to be there. Local celebrities, Business leaders and politicians were all mingling, waiting for the event to start. And there in the front row sat my parents and Julie. My father, now the mayor, looked every bit the part of a distinguished politician. My mother, elegantly dressed, smiled and nodded at people she knew. Julie sat beside them. They hadn't noticed me yet. I found a seat near the back, my heart pounding so loudly, I thought everyone could hear it. Larry rolled onto the stage in his wheelchair to loud applause. He looked confident and comfortable in the spotlight. As he began talking about his book and his life, I saw my parents nodding, trying to look sympathetic. I was born with a severe disability, Larry said. No legs and other health issues. My biological parents abandoned me at the hospital, unable or unwilling to care for me. I watched my father closely, but his expression didn't change. No recognition, no shame, just the practiced look of a politician showing concern for someone else's story. It's a sad story, Larry continued, but I was lucky. I was adopted by a wonderful family who gave me every opportunity to succeed. Still, I always wondered about my birth family, who they were, and why they gave me up. The room was completely silent, everyone focused on Larry as he spoke. My heart raced, knowing the moment that would change everything was coming. Then Larry smiled, his eyes sparkling with a mix of humor and determination. "But that's not the end of my story," he said. "You see, I found my family. My sister Laura is here today." He turned toward me, extending his hand. "Laura, would you join me on stage?" A gasp spread through the audience as I stepped into the spotlight. Many faces showed recognition. After all, I had grown up in this town. But the most dramatic reactions were in the front row. My parents' faces went pale, their expressions shifting between shock, fear, and realization. Julie looked like she had seen a ghost. They knew their carefully built image was about to fall apart. My parents stood quickly, clearly planning to make a fast exit, but I wasn't about to let them escape the truth again. "Mom, Dad, please stay," I called out, my voice echoing through the now silent room. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation, don't you?" My parents froze, trapped by the eyes of the entire audience. Slowly, reluctantly, they sat back down. I took a deep breath. Many of you knew me growing up. You knew my family. But there's a lot you didn't know, a lot that's been hidden for far too long. And then I told them everything. How my parents had abandoned Larry at the hospital because they were ashamed of his physical differences. How they had hidden his existence, building their reputation on lies. And then history repeated itself. I continued, my voice growing stronger. When I got pregnant at 19, they didn't offer support or understanding. They demanded I have an abortion, even though doctors warned it could leave me infertile. When I refused, they kicked me out, pregnant, alone, and abandoned, all to protect their perfect image. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd. I saw people's disgusted looks aimed at my parents, who seemed to shrink in their seats. For years, I've heard them talk about family values and morality. I said, my voice full of emotion. But their actions tell a different story. They abandoned 2 of their children when we needed them the most. They erased us from their lives to keep up their perfect image. The room erupted into chaos. People were shouting, some at my parents, others at each other. Journalists who had come for a simple book signing were now furiously taking notes or speaking into their phones. In the middle of the uproar, I locked eyes with my father. The man who had once seemed so powerful in my childhood now looked small and defeated. My mother was openly crying, and Julie sat frozen, her face filled with shock and confusion. In the days that followed, the story blew up. It was all over the local news, then the national news. My father's political career crumbled overnight. The man who had preached about integrity and family values was exposed as a hypocrite. His position as mayor became impossible to hold, and within a week, he resigned, citing personal reasons. But everyone knew the truth. The college where he had taught quickly distanced themselves, firing him. Amidst all the chaos, one thing became clear. My sister Julie made her choice. She stood firmly by our parents, refusing to face the truth. During a brief phone call, she hissed, "You've ruined everything. Don't contact me again. You're dead to me, just like you're dead to Mom and Dad." But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. A few days later, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in over 22 years. It was Paul, Julie's husband, and the father of my eldest son, Laura. "Hey," he said, his voice hesitant and almost shy. "I've been thinking about us, about what happened with Julie and me. We can't have children, and I thought, well, we have a son together. Maybe we could be a family." I couldn't contain my laughter. "You made up your mind 22 years ago, Paul. When I was pregnant with your child, you abandoned me. You married my sister, and now since you are unable to produce children with her, do you really believe that you will be able to return to me? No, that isn't how things operate. However, Laura—" "Paul, no. My family is gorgeous, and my hubby is amazing. You're not needed, and I most definitely don't want you. Farewell." I hung up with a sense of closure I wasn't aware I was missing. The surprises, however, didn't end there. I received an unexpected call from Paul's parents the following day. "Laura," inquired a hesitant voice. "This is Paul's mother, Lauren. We only recently learned of Jack. Is that accurate? Is our grandson here?" The subsequent discussion was poignant and enlightening. Paul and my parents had informed them that I had aborted a child and fled. For years, they had held the belief that their grandchild was non-existent. Lauren added, her voice cracking, "If that's okay with you, we'd like to meet him. Naturally, we are understanding if you choose not to have us in your lives." I paused to reflect. Paul's actions and the lies my parents uttered were the fault of Paul's parents. They too had been duped. Finally, I said, "Okay. I'll speak with Jack to check if he's willing to meet with you." Jack's grandparents' encounter with him went unexpectedly smoothly. Hugs, emotions, and a lot of catching up took place. Jack, who has always been generous, greeted them warmly. In the months that followed, everything became more routine. We started seeing Larry and his family on a daily basis, and they brought fun and joy into our house. All the grandchildren, whether biological or not, received affection from Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott. About Julie and my parents, all I knew was snippets of information. In an attempt to avoid the controversy, they had relocated. Although I knew that telling the truth was the correct thing to do, I still felt sad for them.